Welcome to UPG Pathshala. This is Prita Bhattacharya, Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. Today we are going to talk about non-monarchical polity in ancient India, and the course is Indian polity. The objectives of this module are to understand the difference between monarchical and non-monarchical political structures, to delve into the origins of non-monarchical polities, to understand the diversities of non-monarchical system. There are two terms which describe the non-monarchical polity: the Gana system and the Sangha system. And lastly, to look at the main features of the political organization of the Ganas. As we know, the early Indian texts recognize the difference between monarchical and non-monarchical political structures. We know about the Rajyas or the monarchical polities and the Ganas or Sanghas, the non-monarchical polities in early India. We also have to understand the diversities of non-monarchical system. There were generally two types of Ganas. Firstly, there were those that consisted of all or a branch of only one clan. For example, the Shakyas and the Kolyas. And secondly, there were those that comprised a confederation of several clans, like the Vajjis or the Yadavas. Now we have to learn something about the location of the Ganas within the subcontinent. As we can glean from the sources, the most powerful Ganas were clustered around the Himalayan foothills in eastern India, while the major kingdoms or Rajyas were located on the fertile tracts of the Ganga valley. However, we must also remember that in northern and western India, there was another concentration of non-monarchical polities which retained greater vestiges of kin-based organization. We'll mainly concentrate here on the Gana systems of eastern India. The Buddhist texts mention the two Mahajanapadas, the Vajji and the Malla, which were Sanghas. The texts also mention other non-monarchical systems as well. The Shakyas of Kapilavastu, Kolyas of Devadaha and Ramagrama, Bulis of Alakappa, Kalamas of Kesaputta, and the Mauryas of Pippalivana, and so on and so forth. We must remember that all these Ganas were clustered around the Himalayan foothills. For example, we can talk about the Videha Gana. The Videha Gana was mentioned as a monarchy in the later Vedic sources, but in the later Pali sources, we can see that it has been transformed into a non-monarchical Gano-type polity. So this is an example of how a non-monarchical polity can also sprout out of a monarchical system. Studying non-monarchical polities, we must understand that there is a wide range of sources that contain multifarious information about the Ganas and Sanghas of early India. Now, as we talk about the sources, let's first mention the Vedic corpus, because especially the Rig Veda, as the Rig Veda is the earliest written material depicting the polities and political formations in early India. The Vedic corpus, even the earliest section of the Rig Veda contains numerous data with regards to the existence of Ganas. But we must understand that in this period, the Ganas had an entirely different connotation. In this period, the Ganas were undoubtedly tribal collectives with very pronounced military characteristics. We can connect these Rigvedic Ganas with the post-Vedic Ganas and Sanghas which lived by the weapons, which is mentioned in the Ashtadhyayi as the Ayudhajivi Sanghas. Although we must keep in mind that it would be fairly premature to speak of an organic, straight relationship between the Vedic Ganas and the post-Vedic republics mentioned in the later texts. Now we'll come to the Pali sources. The Pali sources are very important in the sense that the Pali texts of the Buddhist canons have preserved the most detailed account, the most detailed historical account of the Ganas and Sanghas dating from 6th century BCE to 3rd century BCE. We'll have to consider the other contemporary literary sources as well. First, there is the grammatical work, the famous grammatical work, Ashtadhyayi by Panini, which can be dated to about 5th century BCE to 4th century BCE. Panini is important because Panini and his commentators regarded the Sangha as a distinct form of political organization different from the monarchy. Ashtadhyayi is also important because it mentions several Ganas mostly located around the Punjab region and northwestern India, like the Kshudrakas, Malavas, Ambashthas, Madras, Shibis, etc. Panini also makes a very cogent categorization of the Ganas of early India, of contemporary India. Then we have Arthashastra by Kautilya, which has been dated to the Mauryan period, but we can be quite certain that some of the material contained in the Arthashastra points to a period much earlier than the Mauryan Empire. The materials contained in the Arthashastra are interesting primarily because they outline the monarchy's policy towards the Ganas, which had considerable military potential. So, to continue with the sources, we have later texts like North Indian Buddhist texts which were written almost exclusively in Sanskrit. Just to name a few, we have the Avadana Shataka and the Chivaravastu, which contain a lot of information about the functions of the non-monarchical systems. We have the Jain text Acharanga Sutra, which comes a little late than the Buddhist texts and which gives us a very cogent classification of the states that were in existence in contemporary India. We have mention of the monarchy, the state where there was no king. We have the mention of the state which had dual kingship. We have mention of the Gana. So we see that the Jain text Acharanga Sutra clearly differentiates between different kinds of state and portrays the Gana as a distinctive type of polity which can be set apart from the monarchy. Apart from the indigenous sources, we also have foreign accounts which contain important information about non-monarchical polities. Firstly, we have the Greek participants who were involved in the campaign of Alexander. The campaign of Alexander furnished a great amount of evidence based on which the later classical chroniclers wove together connected accounts about India, its people, and forms of government. So then we have the account of Megasthenes, which can be dated to about 4th century BCE. Megasthenes also made some fairly interesting observations on the non-monarchical polities of ancient India. He mentioned the agriculturists who paid their taxes to the autonomous self-governing polities of India. So all these accounts, the Greco-Roman accounts and the account of Megasthenes, all of them speak about the autonomous states which did not have king. Apart from literary sources, we also have archaeological evidence which sort of corroborates with the literary evidence. We have given some examples. For example, the names of gunners like Yodhiyas, Arjunayanas, Malavas, and Uddehikas occur on coins of early centuries CE. Gunners are also mentioned in inscriptions. For example, Samudragupta is known as Lichavi Dauhitra from inscriptions. We all know that the Lichavis built up a very powerful Gano in Vaishali. Now let's talk a little bit about the origins of non-monarchical polities, how they came about, what were the roots of non-monarchical polities. So the scholars are of the opinion that the kin-based units of the Rigvedic period were apparently the precursors not only of the non-monarchical gunners but also of the monarchical states. When we talk about the origins of non-monarchical polities, we must understand the contradiction between the monarchies and the gunners. We also must understand that there were certain grey areas between the monarchies and the gunners as political formation. There cannot be a straight line which divides the monarchies and the gunners, which at times overlapped. Parallel with the progressive development of ancient Indian society, the non-monarchical polities also went through various developmental phases. Some were simple tribal units and some were states with various forms of aristocratic and oligarchic rules, which had a hereditary elite which presided over the rest of the inhabitants. We can trace two modes of formation of the non-monarchical states. One was a straight transformation, a developmental process of the military democracies of the later Vedic period into more complex political forms. Second is more interesting, where one can trace a transition from monarchical rule into a non-monarchical Gano-type polity. To continue with the question of origin, we have to understand the contradiction, the polarity between the monarchies and the gunners. Parallel with the progressive development of ancient Indian society, the non-monarchical polities also went through various developmental phases. We must understand that they were not a monolithic category. Some were simple tribal units and some were states with various forms of aristocratic or oligarchic rulership. Now we come to the main features of political organization. Talking about the features of political organization, first we must mention the complete absence of hereditary monarchy that is the hallmark of the Rajyas or the monarchical kingdoms. This is what set the Ganas apart from the contemporary monarchical formations. The head of the Gana, who usually bore the title of Raja or Senapati or Pramukha, was appointed by Ganu. However, we must understand that the Indian Ganas were not democracies. Power was vested in the hands of an aristocracy comprising the heads of Kshatriya families. The post of Senapati, the head of Gana, was not inheritable, and his authority was exercised within certain limits. The second feature that we have to take into account is the dominance of the Kshatriyas within the Ganas. Despite the broad basis of the political structure, the Gana's head had apparently had to be a Kshatriya. Apart from the hereditary elite, various other groups, Brahmanas, farmers, artisans, wage laborers, slaves and others lived in these principalities and had a subordinate position. Now we come to the most important institution of the Ganas, the Santhagara, or the special hall for discussing the key questions for resolving the momentous political and administrative issues in the Gana. The Kshatriya Rajas held sessions in the Santhagara, but their effective executive power and day-to-day political management must have been in the hands of a smaller group. The texts state that the Licchavi Gana, which is one of the most powerful powers in the contemporary world, Licchavi Gana usually met once a year during the spring festival to transact important business and also to elect a leader who had a fixed tenure. Day-to-day administrative matters, however, were dealt with by a smaller council of 9 who carried out business in the name of the General Assembly. After discussing the features of the Gana, we must understand the nature of the authority of the Gana. Sources compare a Gana and a Sangha to a monarchy in the sense that the Ganas within their own territories possessed enough authority to kill, punish and banish whoever so deserved, just as a king exercised unassailable rights over the inhabitants of the territory. So was the case with the Ganas. The Gana being the highest body of a government, all questions concerned with the regulations in the country were subject to coordination with it. Apparently, this is most interesting. The Gana also looked into the cases of individual citizens of the state. The Gana was regarded as the highest legislative body invested with administrative, judicial, and apparently financial functions. Now, after a discussion of the features of the Gana Sangha system, we must come to the question as to why the Ganas declined during the period when the monarchies began to assume greater control over the territories. There are several reasons why the Sangha system became weak. One is their principle of governance through discussion. Governance through discussion was both the strength and weakness of a Gana system, because chances of internal dissensions were greater. When you rely more and more on discussions, the chances of dissensions are greater. The second factor is the monarchies had a strong standing army which was sustained by the state, while the Ganas had no notions about a permanent army. The Ganas had a kin-based structure and they were dominated by the Kshatriyas, which prohibited structural expansion. And they were also challenged by the aggressive onslaught of imperial forces. We witness the defeat of Licchavi and Shakya Ganas at the hands of burgeoning monarchical states like Magadha and Koshala in a very early period. In the later period, the older Gana systems of Western India were wiped out by Samudragupta. Now, let's take a look at the journey of the Ganas in early Indian history. The Ganas traversed a long and checkered path of development stretching up to the Gupta period. They played an important role on the political map of ancient India, especially during the struggle of the North Indian states for hegemony in the 5th to 4th centuries BCE. After a long struggle with the monarchies, the Republican Ganas were defeated, but quite a few did not lose their independence up to the Gupta period. So, wrapping up, we can say that around 6th century BCE, the Middle Ganga Valley especially witnessed the crystallization of stratified societies and the development of the state system. Talking about the state system, we have two kinds of political formations that we have already mentioned. We have the monarchy or the Rajya and the Gana or the Sangha, the non-monarchical polities, which were clustered mainly around the Himalayan foothills of eastern India. We have also talked about the origins of the Gana system. It has been argued that both the monarchy and the non-monarchical system or Gana had a common origin, namely the older Gana or the tribal collective mentioned in the Vedic corpus, which had features of an archaic military democracy. But we must remember that the Ganas were at different stages of social and political development. Some were simple tribal collectives and some were more developed polities. Most of the developed polities, the powerful Ganas, were located in eastern India, closer to the monarchical systems. The Ganas located in the Middle Ganga Valley were touched by the process of state formation and were complex polities at a larger stage of development. We can see that the Ganas were touched by the process of state formation and were locked in a combat with the monarchical states that were rising in the very same region. We have also talked about the sources that contain information about the Ganas and Sanghas. We have first mention of the Ganas in the early Vedic period itself, And from then on, we have continuous references to Ganas and Sanghas in the Pali sources, in contemporary texts like the Ashtadhyayi of Panini, the Arthashastra of Kautilya. We have the Jain texts and also the North Indian Buddhist Sanskrit texts. We have also talked about the essential features of political organization that we can associate with the Ganas and Sanghas. While talking about the political organization, we have highlighted the absence of hereditary monarchy, which is the hallmark of all monarchical states. We have also highlighted the dominance of the Kshatriya caste in the Ganas and the Sanghas. We have also mentioned the role of the Santhagara, where the Kshatriya Rajas discussed and debated the momentous issues related to the workings of the Gana. Then we have also discussed the authority of the Gana within the territorial unit that they represented, its relationship with the people who inhabited the territory, and so on and so forth. Then we have moved on to the issue as to why the Ganas and Sanghas lost their power in a period when the monarchical states were on the ascendant. And we have traced a checkered journey of the Ganas and Sanghas from the post-Vedic period up to the rise of the Guptas in eastern India. We have seen that the older Ganas, like the Kshudrakas and the Malavas of western India, were wiped out by the Gupta monarch Samudragupta, and literally this brought an end to the non-monarchical tradition of early India. I hope you have enjoyed our discussion. For further study, you can look up the e-text and further references that are provided with it. Thank you.